Hello, I'm John Adams, editor of Digital Photo, and welcome to this second part of our raw conversion tutorial. This is where we've got to. We've made three separate raw conversions, one for the sky of an image, one for the middle distance of an image, and one for the foreground of an image, and we've stacked them all together in our layers palette so they're all part of one document. Our big challenge now is to get a nice, convincing, seamless, imperceptible blend between all three layers, so we take the best parts of each of them to make one final composite image. Now there are a couple of ways of doing this. One is to actually just rub out the areas that you don't want from a particular layer, and the other way, which is a bit more refined, is to use a layer mask. Now, layer masks are only accessible in the full version of Photoshop, either Photoshop CS, CS2 or CS3. So let's look at how we can use layer masks to make this all work. Now, for a lot of photographers, the idea of layer masking sounds really technical and really complex, but it's not. And let's just run through exactly what's required and what goes on with a layer mask. To keep things nice and easy, what we're first going to do is switch off the top layer. We're going to work on the second layer first, so let's turn that off so it's not affecting our decisions. Right, we'll just move our layers palette out the way a touch. Now, because we're going to work on the second layer, or rather layer 1, the second layer in the stack, let's click on that to highlight it. It's now active and will change color. To create a layer mask isn't too difficult. All you need to do is click on this icon here, which is the Add Layer Mask icon. Click on it once, and you have created a layer mask. It shows up as a white rectangle alongside the layer thumbnail. And when a layer mask is all white, it means it's not actually doing anything. So what happens, therefore, when a layer mask has parts of black within it? Well, that's what we're going to do. We're going to paint black into this layer mask just to see what goes on. So if we pick up a paintbrush, we need to make sure that black is selected as our foreground. If it's not, it should be, but if it's not selected as your foreground color, just hit D and then X on the keyboard. D sets it to a default, and then X swaps it over so black is the foreground color. Now with our brush, we've got a 500 pixel soft edge brush. All we need to do is paint into the layer mask, and it really is that simple. And if we look at our layer mask itself, you can see here that that black has shown up on the layer mask, and all it's doing is revealing what's beneath the image. So painting black into a layer mask is exactly the same as using an eraser. You're just rubbing out what's there. So anything that's black means that it's been rubbed out effectively from the layer the mask is attached to. So why not just use the eraser and avoid this unnecessary complication? Well, the reason is you've got lots and lots of flexibility by using a layer mask. We painted black there, but if, for example, we decide to paint white and we just swap over these foreground colors and use white instead, we can restore exactly how we were to start with. So by painting black, hit X to swap over, paint black, and you kind of erase or delete that part of the layer. And by painting white, hit X and swap it over, you actually restore it. So that's the kind of flexibility you've got with layer masking that you can never have with an eraser. Once you've rubbed something out, it's gone. But with a layer mask, it's never actually gone because you can bring it back whenever you like. So that's the principle of layer masking, and because we've got all that wonderful flexibility, that's why we're using it for this particular project, because it gives us ultimate control. So what we're going to do now is paint black just into the sky area. Let's just clean up our layer mask so we make sure we get a good job of it. There we go. Now it's all white and back to normal. We're simply going to select black as our foreground color by hitting X on the keyboard, and we're just going to paint in the sky. Take a little bit of care around the edge of the mountains, and we're just working on that sky area. We'll go round the tree and just dab away at that. That's the kind of thing, and that looks pretty reasonable there. I've got as I say, a large 500 pixel soft edge brush. That's probably a bit too much. So I'm just going to switch back to white and just do a couple of dabs in here, just so we don't lose too much of that nice tree silhouette coming through. That should do the trick. That's the job done. We've now painted the layer mask into the sky so we can see the difference coming through. Once you've done this first layer mask on layer 1, or our mid-ground conversion, we're then going to select the top layer, and we're going to do the same thing. So once you've got layer 2 selected, switch it on, and then pick the layer mask icon, click on that, and we're going to do exactly the same thing. Only this time, of course, we're going to take in the mountains as well as the sky. So let's just move our layers palette, and we just make sure that layer mask is selected and active, and then we just make sure black is in our foreground color swatch box, and then we just paint in as we just did just now. Only this time we're going to take in the mountains as well as the sky, because that way we'll reveal the mountains from this second layer, or rather layer 1, this second layer here, they'll be revealed from underneath. So we take a little bit of time and care to get a nice blend, and that looks pretty good. And already our job is nearly done. Now we've got a few areas here where we could do with a bit more subtlety, and the easy way to use subtlety with a layer mask is simply to reduce the opacity of the brush. We've got 100% going at the moment, so we're painting, it's black or it's white the way we're painting. But of course we can reduce opacity down to sort of 40, 50%, something like that, and we'll paint grey that way and just allow a little bit of show through. So we can just soften that blend there and just reduce brush size a touch. That's it. And that's just smoothed it out. I think they're the only areas we need to worry about, really. Just round about there. Yep, and that's done the trick nicely. So in our layer mask, we've got a couple of grey spots where we're just helping the blend out by using a low opacity brush. And that, in a nutshell, is the entire principle of how to blend multiple raw conversions together. If we look on our layers palette where we've started from, that's our sky conversion, and by layer masking our middle ground conversion, we've actually held back the sky, so the sky remains just as it is in the background layer because it's been masked out. And then of course in our top layer we've held back the sky and the mountains so the foreground comes through. And I think you'll agree that the tonal range we get from this composite result by using the 3 different conversions is much better than any of the renditions we've tried in the raw converter. That's simply an underexposed foreground. This one had a washed out sky, this one had a completely washed out sky, but by holding back the right parts and selecting the bits of the image we want, we get a really nice composite image. And of course the beauty is we haven't added anything to the image, we haven't taken anything away from the image. It is in essence a pure image taken at one moment in time, but we've simply worked it using the raw converter to get the best possible results. But we're not quite finished yet because there are a few extra tweaks we can do just to bring out the very best in the image now that it's fully formed. And we're going to do this by making a couple of adjustment layers. And to make an adjustment layer, first of all, let's just increase the size of our layers palette a little bit so we can add a few more layers to it. What we're going to do is pick up the freehand lasso tool from the toolbox, and we're just going to select this middle distance area. Though it's looking much better than it would have done with any of the single raw conversions, it's still a little bit washed out, mainly through the effect of haze and distance. So what we're going to do is ramp up the contrast just by making a rough selection around the mountain area. Something like that should do the trick. Just around this zone here. We're now going to feather this selection, so in CS or CS2, go up to Select and choose Feather, and you'll get the Feather dialog box. If you're using version CS3, use Select Refine Edge, and there's a feather slider within that. Go for a value of 120 pixels in the feather radius, and click OK. That'll soften this edge without affecting the edges of the image. And once you've done that, we need to create a curves adjustment layer. So if we just look at our adjustment layer icon here, click on the half black, half white circle, and from the list, choose Curves. And that brings up our curves dialog box, and all we're going to do is just adjust this curve to give a bit more contrast in that mountain range area. Now you can see by bending the curve we can change the contrast and the kind of exposure of that particular area. But we just want a fairly subtle S-curve, so we're crushing the darker tones and we're boosting the brighter tones. This just ramps up contrast and gives us a really nice crisp feel to the slightly snow-dappled mountain summits, and that's working well actually. I like that. So a subtle S-curve in the curve should do the trick nicely. Once you've done that, click OK. And if you want to check whether it's working well or not, you can just click on the eye icon of that adjustment layer, and you can see there it's looking a bit grey and washed out, but with our curves adjustment layer, it's pepped it up and really helped out the contrast. Once we've done that, we're going to do the same thing again, but this time to the foreground area. So with the freehand lasso tool, we're just going to draw a rough line around this area, leaving out the walkers, taking out this bit. We'll miss out the tree as well, and then run down this wall line here, just around the foreground area. We're going to darken this slightly by using, again, a curves adjustment layer. So once you've made that selection, go to select and choose feather, and again 120 pixels. So click OK to that, and that'll soften the edge of this selection as well. Remember, of course, in CS3, go to select refine edge instead. Right, once we've feathered, then go to the adjustment layer icon and choose curves again. And this time we're just going to darken that foreground as we suggested. Something like that should be good. The reason for that is we've got a very dark sort of margin at the top of the image for the sky, and with a very bright foreground it doesn't quite work, so we're just forcing that foreground down a bit just to help it balance the overall image. So something like that. Pull the curve down and the job's a good one. That should do the trick nicely. Click OK once that's done. And now, as a finishing touch, all that remains is to do a bit of dodging and burning. And to avoid sort of breaking anything we've done so far, we're going to do this on a separate layer by first of all condensing everything we've done into a new layer. So if we just increase the size of the layers palette a touch, click on the create a new layer icon, and we'll get a blank layer 3 at the top of the layers stack. Now, to get all of this work crunched onto this layer without losing it, all we need to do is hold down the Alt key on the keyboard, then pick on the flyout arrow and select Merge Visible. Still holding the Alt key at the moment. Release the mouse once you get to Merge Visible, and then release the Alt key, and everything you've done will be crunched into this one layer. Now we're just going to double click on that layer's name there, and we're going to call it Burn, just to remind ourselves what we're doing. And once we've done that, we're going to pick up the Burn tool. There it is there, the hand sort of icon. The Burn tool gets picked up, and in the options bar at the top of the screen, we're going to set range to shadows and exposure to no more than 4%. We'll try 4%, there we go, but don't go any more than that. The default values of 50% are way too high for photographic burning, so set it to 4% and you'll be fine. Now with a large brush, I've got a sort of 600 pixel brush here. If you want to change brush size, just use the left and right square brackets keys to go up and down. But 600 should be okay here. And I'm just going to do a bit of burning by playing it over the image to make the darker parts of the picture slightly darker still. Now I'm just going to hit the Tab key so I can see what I'm doing. That gets rid of all our palettes so we can really focus on the image. Now I'm just going to now burn into the image. And you can see there saturation increases slightly. There, just burning away into the foreground area. A tiny bit across the mountains. Maybe a little bit in the sky, but not too much. And that's probably all that's needed, actually. We don't need to go too mad on our burning. There we go. Now I'll hit the Tab key again to bring our palettes back. If you want to see how your burning's progressing, you can just switch off that burn layer. That was the advantage of making that separate layer. You can see there, it's just helping lift the contrast and indeed the saturation in those areas we've applied a bit of burning to. So that's looking good. We're now going to do a bit of dodging as well, and so we can keep track of where we're going, we're just going to duplicate this burn layer. So we drag that over the create a new layer icon, and that gives us a burn copy. We're going to immediately rename that, and we're going to call it Dodge instead, because that's going to be our dodging layer. So once we have that, we'll now set up our Dodge tool. So click on where the Burn tool is and select the Dodge tool instead. And this time we want range set to highlights and exposure again to no more than sort of 4% or so. So highlights in range, 4% in exposure, and then again we need a pretty big brush. We'll go for about 600 pixels. And then we can do our dodging on the image. So hit the Tab key to get rid of all the palettes, and then we can just work away into this foreground area. That's the kind of thing. Just getting a little bit of extra brightness and a bit of extra sparkle to the highlights in the image. That looks pretty good there. I don't think I need to dodge the sky too much at all because there's lots of highlights which are just on the edge. So any dodging I do up there is likely to burn them out entirely. So I'm going to be a bit careful in the sky and avoid it. So we just dodge away. There we go. And just hitting the tab key to bring our palettes back, we can check our progress quite easily by just clicking on the dodge layers eye icon. And you can see the difference is subtle but important all the same. So we can actually switch both our burn and our dodge layers off. There's our original there, or where we got to with our layer masking and our contrast adjustments. But with the burn and the dodge, we can see that it is making a big difference to the image, even though the changes are quite subtle. So there we have it. That's our completed image. It looks quite a complex layers palette, but if you followed it through, you can see that everything's quite simple and quite systematic. All we've done is taken our sky layer, blended in our middle distance, blended in our foreground to give us a nice even exposure across all the broad range of tones that we've captured. We've then made a curves adjustment layer just to this area here to improve the contrast in that part, and we've done the same to our foreground just to boost that a little bit and darken it down. Then we've added some burning just to enrich the tones and a bit of dodging just for good measure. So that's our completed image. And of course, if you're happy with all the work you've done, to crunch all of this work into one single layer, all you need to do is click on the flyout arrow and select Flatten Image, and there we have it. That's our completed picture, looking much, much better than the one we started with. Do try using this multiple raw conversion technique for your landscape pictures. It's absolutely fantastic and is guaranteed to work really successfully when you've got very high dynamic range, high contrast images. So if your skies are about 2 or 3 stops brighter than anything else, this raw conversion, or rather multiple raw conversion technique, will restore detail to your foregrounds and will actually bring your images back to life. That's why it's so important, and that's why we've spent some time explaining how you can do it. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.